All right, finally getting this kind of thing working, I hope. I got my new tripod, and so the angle is going to be a little bit different because the tripod's set up a little bit differently. But anyway, I have a couple of things that I'm working on, but I figured I could just do a really short video today about this. I just finished reading Scott Horton's Provoked, finally. It took me months to get through the whole thing because, as you know, I've been reading a bunch of, Rousseau and Kropotkin, and even reading a bunch of stuff for my what would you call it, fiction channel, right? And so I finally managed to finish this, and, I just figured I would talk a little bit about it. Like, I've got a couple basic notes here. As you can see, right, this is a massive, massive book. We're talking, 700 some pages of relatively dense text. On the plus side, on the shortening it side, there's a lot of citations as well. Most of them are contemporaneous news sources, basically getting people's words at the time that the thing happened, rather than looking at what they think happened 20 years after the fact. It's great because you get to read the words of heads of state and their cronies lying to you in their own words. And often admitting to lying to you even in their own words. This book is a huge accomplishment for Scott Horton. It is 40 years of detailed history. I think starts in freaking Reagan years, I think, right? Well, it starts at George H.W. Bush, but it does discuss some of the things that Reagan did that led up to it, basically. So, like it's even bigger than it looks just from the table of contents. It doesn't just cover like America versus Russia over those 40 years. It even kind of covers things in the lead up or related things. Like there's a whole section on the war in Kosovo and how that affected all the lead up to this, and how this was lied about and that was lied about, and this was a ruse and this wasn't true, and this was spun this way, and this, all that good stuff. There's even a good chunk of a chapter on like the not just the fall of the USSR, because you could imagine that the fall of the USSR is a directly important part to this whole situation, but also kind of the economics of the fall of the USSR, and a lot of details about how that all went down. And Scott could have just skipped all of that if he had really felt like it, but it's all in there, and it's very, very interesting to read about, because a lot of it is not exactly what you would imagine the way things went down. This book is really great because it's kind of damning to governments on all sides. There's a bunch of really awful, like, what would you call it, even like two-faced stuff that the U.S. government has done. There's even and similar, there's a bunch of stuff about the bad things that Russia or the USSR has done in this intervening period as well. There's talks about a lot of the things that a lot of other countries were doing to kind of contribute to this. Other places where there was something that happened that was pertinent to the situation now. All kinds of stuff like that. There aren't any punches pulled. Basically, Scott Horton is just completely destroys a lot of these state officials in a very succinct, very Scott Horton kind of way, and so it's going to be fun to read. Scott's anti-war message is clear and present throughout the whole thing. It's very obvious, kind of, where he's coming at this from, and what his aims and goals are. There's no like lofty theory as you might have expected. You throw a lot of theoretical mumbo jumbo in there to kind of justify a position or what, but instead, what Scott offers are a lot of, hey, this is what happened. Here's what led up to it. Here are some plausible alternatives that might have had better results. And, here's possibly why. It's very practically written in that sense, and very good, a very solid read. Look, I mean, what can I say other than, if you are at all interested in the anti-war movement in any way, you should buy a copy of this book, if for nothing, to read it, obviously, but also just to help out Scott for all the work that he has done in producing this book and putting it out there and pushing back against the lies that we're told every single day of the year. He is the best foreign policy guy that the libertarian or pro-freedom movement has, and that if that's not worth something, then I don't know what is. Thanks to this book, we don't need to rely on shaky speculation to condemn the warmongers. We don't need to think about, oh, well, he might have thought this. No, we have it all in their own words. And the most of the proof that we need is usually right out there in the open. They say it out in the open, and they put it in the New York Times, and then it goes off onto a shelf somewhere, and no one ever looks at it again. And so Scott going back and finding all of these sources and picking them up and finding all these quotes and finding all of this historical context is something that is incredibly valuable. And so, we just get to see the two-facedness of everybody on both sides of this stupid conflict, and how there were so many off-ramps and so many ways that things could have been done better. And so, again, Scott Horton's Provoked. I'll put a link in the description. Scott also is doing an audiobook version of this book, which is the insane task on his Substack. So maybe I'll put a link to that too. So do one or the other if you want, or both. But definitely this book is worth taking a look at, worth giving a read. It's basically written in kind of like a chronological order. The main section names are named after U.S. presidents: George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush. No, George W. Bush, not H.W., right? Obama, Obama, Trump, Biden, and then Trump again. And there's just so much information in here. Like, you see that I've got a decent amount of tags in here, and I kind of petered out on the tags in the second half of the book because there was just so much going on. But fortunately, it's all arranged in a way that is relatively easy to kind of come back to. If you know when it happened, then you can find it in here pretty easily. I mean, it would have been nice to have an index and stuff like that, but that would have been an even more ridiculous task. So that would be kind of the one downside of the way that this book is written. There's no detailed index so you can look things up, unfortunately. However, there is a website for this book. There is a free excise chapter that you can get if you sign up for Scott Horton's email list or the Libertarian Institute. And yeah, it's a solid book, very well written, tons and tons of sources. Almost all of them are sources that were written or spoken at the time of the event Scott's talking about. And so there's no like what's the word? Like looking at something through rose-tinted glasses. This is what people were actually saying at the time. And so it's very valuable just for that. And that was one of my main criticisms of one of his earlier books. I think it was which one was it? I think it was Enough Already, where he wrote Enough Already without really citing things. And that makes Enough Already much more readable, but it also makes it completely useless for convincing people that aren't already on our side. And so Scott did not do that with this book. It has got tons and tons of sources. I think he said 6,000 or something like that. It's crazy. It might even be more than that. But anyway, Provoked, Scott Horton. Give it a look. If this is something that at all interests you, then it is definitely one of the most important sources that you can get for this whole 40-year brouhaha between the U.S. and Russia, and even pre-Russia when it was still the USSR. The names on here are Powerful by Andrew Cockburn, Detailed by John and Jay Mearsheimer, and Crucial by Ron Paul, the great Ron Paul. And I also made a meme a couple weeks ago where I had zombie Bob Murphy holding up saying book, and Bob Murphy said that was a good one-word review of the book as well. So it's got the great names behind it. It's got the great name of Scott Horton on it. It's got his great and detailed and just drilling down into the meat of things work that Scott is known for. And if you want something that you can beat people over the head with physically and philosophically, this is the book for you. Anyway, Provoked. Go check it out. Have a good one.